When most people hear the word change, they probably think of coins or maybe about clothing. Other times, change brings to mind global warming or perhaps mental, societal, or political change. Movies, poems, art, novels, and our real world represent change in each of these ways. Movies and art often depict history or problems with our world, while poems and novels tend to focus on human nature as a whole. This is a piece from a collection of works in the second Fort Portal annual street art exhibition on climate change. Obviously, the issue of deforestation is the focus of this piece. The lone human hugs a tree before piles of lumber, protecting it from loggers and their machinery. Deforestation represents not only the physical change of our environment by removing massive amounts of trees and therefore altering the habitat of many different species of wildlife, but also a need for change in our policies regarding the natural world. Deforestation is only a small part of this problem that engulfs us today. For me, this artwork really stood out since I've always loved our natural world and have always supported policies that preserve it. So I just wanted to take a second to look at this quote by Cassandra Clare. I think it holds true because obviously we're influenced by literature and poetry. We're in IB English class, we would know that better than anybody else. But I think it's also important to mention that we're also able to express ourselves through literature and poetry, which in this poem by Elizabeth Barrett Browning is incredibly important and impactful. So, in this poem by Elizabeth Barrett Browning called Change Upon Change, the narrator basically links their past lover to the changing seasons. Emotional change is compared to physical change as the narrator expresses their feelings regarding the departure of a presumed spouse, mentioning oaths, feelings, water, flowers, things growing and dying as the seasons pass, as time passes. So, this film wouldn't be complete without a reference to at least one of the novels we read this year. Obviously, the Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka focuses on emotional, physical, and social or familial change. Gregor Samsa wakes up one morning to find himself turned into a giant bug. Of course, his family is shocked and disgusted, and who wouldn't be? Samsa is gradually stripped of any love and respect from his family, as social structure changes, or familial structure, I should say. For example, Greta, his younger sister, takes charge of him, feeding him, cleaning the room that he lives in, etc., etc., and both parents begin to work, with their main breadwinner being a giant bug now. Mr. Samsa becomes a physical barrier and a emotional barrier to in regards to Gregor seeing his family and the world outside of his room, um, an action that ultimately, in a compilation of other things, leads to Gregor's death. Bohemian Rhapsody is a movie about the band Queen focusing on the lead singer Freddie Mercury, released in 2018. Mercury was a man of extreme vocal talent who struggled not only with his emotions and his need to be loved, but also with his sexuality and identity in a time of less acceptance than we have today. Queen's revolutionary change in style of music and Mercury's influence on our world are felt to this day as millions of fans celebrated the release of this film that supports change and daring to be different. So this type of change is honestly the most frightening. BBC published an article regarding climate change titled Warning from Antarctica's Last Forests. The article focuses on fossilized plants that, through research, we know that grew during the Pliocene era, a time on Earth when average temperatures were 3 degrees warmer and ocean levels 20 meters higher. Obviously, carbon emissions have led to the greenhouse effect on our planet, setting the stage for a recreation of the Pliocene era's environment. It's important to note that we have created this environment in roughly a century. This is truly terrifying as we are not only threatening the Antarctic, but as a result, the world as a whole, as ocean levels and temperatures continue to rise. So, how has this all affected me? Well, change is pretty easy to write about. After all, everything changes. weather, opinions, grades, clothing, the list goes on and on. The change that I've written about in these Odyssey assignments have focused on artwork, film, and literature. These types of change that are represented by each respective genre are quite impactful and beautiful in their own ways, but the change that has affected me the most is pretty broad. I would say that the most significant change I've experienced has been through my family life. When I was young, my parents split up. I was about 5 years old at the time, so I didn't really understand much beyond the fact that I would have two bedrooms and two Christmases. As I grew older, my father moved to Florida to pursue a degree in law, and my sister and I were shattered. He still lives in Orlando. We rarely see him. Most would call such a change negative. To be fair, it is, but only to a point. I have now a stepfather who would do most anything for my mother, sister, and myself. For that I am eternally grateful. My father's departure from my family physically has led to a conflicted feeling toward him, but the experience and people that have come into my life as a result have proven to me that change, as they say, is inevitable and necessary. The change in my family has allowed me to realize who and what is important, what qualities I admire in people, and perhaps most important of all, I have learned to embrace such change.